such as Excalibur, Age of Apocalypse, Black Panther, and X-Men. Yung bigoted si Mr. Ken Lashley! Ken Lashley, ladies and gentlemen! Thank you so much, our Canadian sensation over here! Moving on from our neighboring Southeast Asian country, Malaysia, please welcome Malaysian-American comic book artist who worked on the Green Lantern title for the past 3 years for DC Comics and recently founded Tan Comics. Please welcome Billy Tan! Again, Billy, thank you so much for joining us here right now. And rounding out our panel of comic book artists for this afternoon, one of my personal favorite comic book artists, cover artists, and I'm sure you all agree, he's also one of your favorite comic book cover artists. Very iconic covers from Secret Wars 1 all the way to Captain America Annual. And of course, we've got 10 Nights of the KG Beast. Please welcome Mr. Mike Zeck! Mike, thank you so much for joining us here in the Philippines. Guys, please take your seats. So this is how the panel will go. I'll start off with asking some questions from our panelists this afternoon. And later on, we've got some microphones in the audience, I believe. Please feel free to approach the microphones later on and address the question to the comic book artist whom you'd like to speak to. Now, as we make our way over here, maybe the first question I think many of them want to ask is really, that first big break, what brought you into comics in the first place? You come from so many different backgrounds. Whilce, you were here, you were there in the States. Billy, living in the University of Kentucky, out of there, entering into Image Comic Books. Ken, from Canada, breaking into Canada to Excalibur. Please let us know a bit more about your history. Jason, how did it start off for you in the comic book world?
That was kind of the cool part is I always loved comics, but I really wanted to be a movie poster artist. And then by the time I was good enough, they weren't using art anymore. And I had a good friend of mine who was a comic book artist, and he just introduced me to some people. And it just started happening. You know, it was really interesting at the time. I had some black and white paintings, and I was faxing them to people. That's how long ago it was. And people were like, he must be really good with color. And they assumed, so I started getting all these covers, and I had to learn how to really step up. But I started with smaller companies, and then I had the right lunch at the right time, and I started doing Star Trek, and then that led to a lot of other stuff.
And what do you feel at that time became sort of like your big break? When did you know you've made it in the comic book industry?
The Star Trek covers.
The Star Trek covers.
And I was kind of like the Star Trek guy with Paramount, and then they'd say, we have a toy, we have this. And so when everyone asked Paramount, I was on a short list there of guys who could do Star Trek stuff.
So thanks a lot for sharing with that, Jason. Whilce, over here, interesting story as well for you. I think you started off with our good friends from, is it Marvel? Was your first break? Before that, can you tell us a bit more about your story?
Well, I you know, knock on wood, all my life I've been lucky, suerte. I went to San Diego, and my cousin said, there's this thing you gotta go to called San Diego Comic-Con. And it was about this big back then. But I was,
this room, as big as this room?
Just this big. And I was, again, really lucky because that year, all of the Marvel editors were at the convention, and they actually were looking for people. And so I showed them my stuff. I showed them all the wrong stuff. I showed them pinups. But for some reason, they decided to make Awasaki, and then they gave me a job in Punisher, Uncanny, everything after that.
And who remembers The Punisher by Whilce Portacio back in the 80s? Hopefully there's somebody my age over here. no, but there, thank you so much. I remember reading the 80s issues. Oh, Ken! Remember those 80s issues when he started doing Punisher. And from there, that you moved to, was that X Factor right after that one? And
yeah.
Punisher, then X Factor. Then what was your defining moment when you knew that you made it big in the comic book world? When you made that big splash and people knew Whilce Portacio?
Well, it was actually multiple moments of the same thing. When I got onto X Factor had the old team, the original team, what they now call First Class.
First class, yes.
First class is in first class, was in, the whole original team. But I grew up with Cyclops, I grew up with Marvel Gold Beast and everybody. And when I got on X Factor, I had no problem being on the book because it was the old team. And then when they asked me to go on another book, another X book, that was when the original team was moving over to that book. So I did that book and went over to Uncanny, I went over with them. If you follow my X career, I followed that team through the different books.
That's right. I only see that right now, the whole trend.
Yeah, in fact, when we decided to do the gym and, the red and blue thing, the red and blue or red and gold? Blue and gold. 30 years ago, I can't remember anymore. But when we decided to do that, we actually had choices. And I just, again, specifically stood up and said, I feel this is my team.
I see.
And I want to stay with them.
I see. And then for Ken over here, very interesting. I know that you started off, and it was hard because you came off after the run by Alan Davis. When you came
Yes, I did.
And that must have been a tall order for you to come in. How did it happen for you? How did you break into the industry?
Well, I was fortunate enough that there was two really crappier issues than mine ahead of me before I took on Alan Davis stuff. So I was grateful for that guy, wherever he is now. Thank you very much. Yeah, so my first job was Excalibur, and I was like 22. I was young. I didn't know what I was doing, and it showed. And but I started working in the X-Men office, and off you go.
But how did you get in the first place? I mean, usually people just say, did you just show in some work to editors?
Well, I showcased my work. There was a guy, a TV show in Toronto called Prisons of Gravity, and he does a show, and he go around and do interviews. And he was at a comic convention, and I showed my work. He thought my stuff was pretty good. Took it to Marvel to showcase it, and just show it to them. And I was lucky enough, I got offered 4 or 5 jobs that first day, but the first person who called me was Excalibur, so that's a job that I took.
That's really good timing for you.
You're telling me. It was awesome. You couldn't believe it. I can't believe it. It was awesome.
And then now I'm looking at your body of work right now. You've done Age of Apocalypse.
Yep.
You've done some Superman titles as well very recently in the New 52. Which for you do you feel is your defining moment when it comes to comic books?
Well, I mean, it depends which era. I've been working for a long time. I mean, I think what people mostly know for is Excalibur, Age of Apocalypse, but I think my current run on Uncanny X-Men is probably my most favorite because it was the book that I loved as a kid. It was John Byrne, Chris Claremont. Having a chance to put your name, on the Uncanny X-Men book is the weirdest thing ever. So when the books come out, I just kind of stare at them like, this is so odd. But that's probably, I would say that's my favorite. And also getting to draw the Superman Doom fight, getting to draw that over again for the New 52 was in hollow territory. Getting a chance to do that again was kind of cool too.
Well, thanks a lot. And now, Billy, how about you? I mean, you took a rather circuitous route until you arrived at the comic book industry. From Malaysia, you migrated to the States. You worked in the University of Kentucky. Then how did you break into Image at the time?
Yes, it was early '90s. I wasn't really exposed to the American comics until I got into college. Actually, Whilce and Jim Lee's X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, was one of the earlier comic book that I was exposed to, and I was totally at awe at what you could do in a comic book. So that sort of piqued my interest into getting into the comics. But I think later when the Image started up and that the Photoshop thing, the digital coloring takes off, and it's like that would totally blow my mind. And that's when I decided, hey, I gotta give it a shot. And I went with my class. They had a field trip to New York, so I went there to Marvel office without any appointment, just demanding the editor to show to look at my portfolio, and guess what happened? I got chased out, So that's not a way to try to get in the industry, guys, if you want to do that. But luckily, after I got back, Top Cow Production, part of Image, they had a talent search.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got into, I was one of I think Finch got in first, and then I was the second guy that got in.
Wow, so you got into the talent search, and that's where you started to develop your skills.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And after you broke in, and right now, I want to find out what's a defining moment for you when it came to the comic books. What was a defining career for you when you were doing comic books? Because like for me, it's doing the Green Lantern and doing the Orange Lanterns, which for me was a big thing. But for you, what was the big thing for you when you
I think two things. One of them was Uncanny X-Men. The first job that I was on was X-23 and then Spider-Man, and then Axel gave me a call, and he was like, Chris is on the phone with us, and I was just talking, and it was always Axel that talking, and Chris never said Chris Kleiman, just in case. He'd never say anything. And then, so I was just talking. After I hang up, and I started to realize that he meant Chris Kleiman, right? He just said Chris. He didn't say, and I was just sweating, It's like, oh man, that was a turning moment. And the other one was Brian Bendis, on the New Avengers. And that was a big leap. I never even dream of, getting on books like Uncanny X-Men or the New Avengers. It was mind-blowing. So.
This is not being written by Brian Michael Bendis at the time, right?
Yes, the New Avengers.
I see. So we've got actually 3 ex-alumni here in the center stage. But of course, guys, to be honest with all of you, I'll be honest with all 4 of you, I was most excited when I found out Mike Zeck was coming over here. I think many of us.
Me too.
Round of applause, please, for Mike Zeck. I grew up. I think all 4 of you grew up seeing these iconic Mike Zeck covers, powerful physiques, crisp, bold lines. When you see the Captain America versus Wolverine cover, these stick to your mind, or the composition of the Secret Wars one or cover, or the Spider-Man cover where he has his first black costume. These things are fantastic. So Mike, before everything else, I just want to say thank you for coming over here to the Philippines.
Well, thanks for revealing my age.
and for you, well, when you started your career, Charlton.
At my beginning.
Yeah, when you started off.
It was back in the Stone Age when I was trying to break in. There was no San Diego Con, but there sort of was the equivalent. In the early 70s, there was Phil Seuling's New York, July 4th New York Weekend Convention. Mm-hmm. And the advantage of being in New York, having it in New York, was the one convention, I think, where you would actually see the publishers. DC, Marvel, even Charlton Comics set up there. So I took that trip, that was sort of my avenue. In a sense, I had 2. I took that trip, I showed my portfolio around, but I also had some work appearing in fanzines, specifically the South Florida-based fanzine, RBCC. And it was a well-respected fanzine, enough that many of the editors or other artists actually subscribed to that fanzine. So sort of at the same time, Roy Thomas discovered my stuff via the RBCC. Started giving me a few little illustrations in the black and white magazine line. And then Charlton picked up on my stuff, and I worked about 2 years for Charlton Comics on they didn't have superheroes, but they had the horror comics. Truthfully, I needed that training ground. I think it was, I'm really glad they were there. I think I needed those couple of years, and then felt like it was the right time then to transition into Marvel.
And your first comic book for Marvel was that Master of Kung Fu?
Master of Kung Fu. Yeah, the regular artist on that book kept missing deadlines, and then they would give me, it's not even a fill-in issue. They would ask me to take the issue. Really, the first time Archie Goodwin called me, he was embarrassed to ask it, but he asked me if I could pencil a Master of Kung Fu issue in 1 week.
In 1 week?
In 1 week.
It was like 23 pages.
Yeah.
Is that right? How do you guys feel, Ken, when you hear that 23 pages in 1 week? Is that...
Hey, my last X-Men issue, I did the whole thing pencil and ink in 13 days, so that's the business.
Have you had any experience at that, Whilce, or
that X-Men issue that Jim and Scott and I did, they called us up and said somebody was late, and can you guys pencil and ink an issue in, I think it was 3 weeks. We did it in 2 weeks.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, going back to you, Mike, and after you moved to Marvel, I think the biggest thing for me was seeing you in Secret Wars 1, because that is etched in my mind. That's where your art is forever etched in my mind. But for you, what was the biggest break when it came to Marvel? Or was it Kraven's Last Hunt? Which for you was the biggest job that you had, or the most defining job you had?
Yeah, I was very, very lucky to basically work with the right writers at the right time. I hit some guys on their best moments, I think. It really was like a great decade for me because I was a big Captain America fan growing up, and that was the character that I wanted to draw when I got into Marvel. So I sort of put my my invitation, I said, look, when it opens up, let me know. That was the first thing I wanted to do. So it did. That opened up, and then that kind of opened the door when Secret Wars came along. They took the team, me and John Beatty, to do Secret Wars. So you know how that turned out, and then and right after that was the Punisher Limited series, and you know how that turned out, and right after that was Kraven's Last Hunt. So I was like an actor getting hit series after hit series in a decade. So it was pretty amazing and pretty lucky with all three of those things just never ever being out of print and still talked about today. So yeah, I couldn't be happier with the way things worked out for me at Marvel.
Wow, so we've got people who've got 2 Punisher alumni, and then we've got 3 X-Men over here on stage. Now, going back to Jason, and the question I'd like to pass on to the rest of you is that people always talk about, we're always usually the product of the times we live in terms of our art. And I want just to ask, because as I look at your different artworks, we can see the different influences which come in and create a unique look for you in terms of your art. Jason, for yourself, what were the influences that led to your very photorealistic art? Where did that come from?
Very much movies and comic books. I was just deeply steeped in both. I wanted to be a comic book artist or a movie poster artist. And when I was very young, there was no internet or books to give me any direction. I just called up my favorite artist, Drew Struzan, and he was kind enough to let me come visit him on a regular basis. He would give me tough critiques, encouraging but tough. And the first time I went there, I overstayed my welcome because I just hardly didn't want to leave. I felt like I've kind of come home. And I learned so much from him. And my head was just brimming with all this new knowledge. I said, okay, I'm going to go home and work on it. And he saw me off to the car and he said, okay, I want you to come back, but not until you're better. Meaning, and I kind of, okay, and I thought about that. And what I took it to mean is, it's 1986, I'm Drew Struzan, I'm the greatest illustrator in the world. He would think it that way, but he was saying, don't have wasted my day. I just gave you stuff that not too many people are going to get. Don't waste this. And I've never forgotten that, and I've always felt like I have to be my best. I got to push and do the most with what this gift he gave me, because to just let it wither away or not really build on it, it's disrespecting this great gift he gave me. So the next time I came was about a month and a half later, and he goes, okay, you have made all new mistakes. You found rude ways to make the old mistakes. Okay, this is why. And you break it down. I say, okay. And it was the next step, the next step. And that went on for a long time. Until finally one time I went over there and went, all right. And I said, all right, what? And you're not doing it anymore. It was kind of like, you are a man. And that was it. And it was kind of up to me to guide my way. And he's still an encouraging figure to me. He looks out for me. More often than teaching me something, he'll say, how are you doing? Do you get work? Are they taking care of you? He wants to know that I'm doing okay as an artist and a person.
Well, that's a great story of actual mentorship from Padawan to actually becoming a Jedi Master over there.
Yeah, I'm definitely Padawan. But, and I don't want to take up too much of the time, but you were talking about how things are changing. There was a time when I thought, okay, I want to bring realism to comic books. Mm-hmm. I want to make it real. And I was working on it. I said, maybe another year I can really get this. And then I met Alex Ross and I said, okay, I'm going to bring comic book dynamics to movie type stuff, because I knew I couldn't touch what Alex was doing. And so that's what I try to do now. For instance, I'm doing some work for Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not the movie, it's not the comic book because there's all these in-between places that Marvel has. They want to promote just Guardians. So they have certain kind of in-between versions. So they said, we want something to promote and market with. So there's all these different little nooks and crannies that weren't there before.
I see.
Need filming.
Very interesting world that we're moving into with a combination of both the cinematic and the comic book universes. And Whilce, how about for yourself? Who were your initial influences when you started drawing? And now, do you have anybody you look for inspiration for your work?
I actually have 3 influences from way back when I first started with science fiction novels. When I was a preteen, my dad, as a second job, he worked at the university, and for some reason the professors gave him all these science fiction books, novels, and he handed them to me. And I think that's where my imagination came from, and my world building a world that actually means something to the powers and everything that we did. And then after that, and those authors were like Frank Herbert, and Mary Zimmer Bradley. And then I went into films just like Jason, Akira Kurosawa, Scorsese, David Lean. There I think I got my storytelling chops, and all those directors that are like this have a lot of hard grit and realism. And then after that, when we were in the X office, we were lucky that we knew this one person who worked in Japan and he worked in the US. And he gave us these, this is how old this was, VHS copies of movies like Appleseed, Macross Mospedo, Lensman. So we were from the X office back then in the 80s to 90s. We were some of the first people to actually see manga and anime stuff. And we used that, and like Jim and I used that in the Uncanny books to do cyberware and stuff like that.
And you could see, like in the Iron Man, well, for me, for the Iron Man costumes you're doing for Heroes Reborn.
Yeah. Actually, you know, what's kind of interesting about that is, real quickly, through a fluke of not knowing stuff, when you look at the comic book, it's 8x11, so it's fairly small. We didn't know that you actually work 11x17, and that they shrink it down. So, you know, a lot of us would look at the comic book and say, okay, that's the amount of detail you need to draw, and that's how the size you need to draw. And then when you got in and you get 11x17, now you gotta get that, and then that shrinks. And so the covers come out and they're even more detailed than we are. And so the next generation comes out and they even did more detail after that. And so I think that's where a lot of that detail and design and everything came from.
I see. How about Ken, for yourself? I understand John Byrne was one of your influences when you started off?
Yeah, John Byrne, pretty much all the Whilce Portacio and everybody else, all the X-Men artists, Jim Lee. I was a big fan of those kinds of kind of work. But I also liked other things that were outside of just comics and other things. But those were the main influences of comics, were the core guys that were doing cool stuff. But probably Pitt was a big, Dale Keown was a big influence on me. I got to meet him and work with him too, so it's kind of cool. And those are my major influences.
I see. And Billy, for yourself, you came from Top Cow, so I'm guessing a lot of the top.
Yes, yeah. Well, the very early on is Frank Frazetta that opened up my fantasy art world, and later it's like guys like Whilce or Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, all those homage artists.
I see. And Mike, very. What are your influences as well, Mike?
My influences, well, I'll date myself again, but as a very young aspiring artist, there was no Marvel Comics yet. So my influence, I had DC Comics basically to look at. My early influence were obviously like Gil Kane's Green Lantern, Carmine Infantino's Flash, even Kurt Swan's Superman. I really loved that stuff, and maybe especially Joe Kubert. His war works and stuff. Those are my earliest influence, and a little bit of pre-superhero Marvel in there, the Astonishing Tales and those books. So I had already discovered Ditko even prior to Spider-Man, and loved his work as well.
Yes. For those of us nodding, you know, generation of comic book artists you grew up with. Just briefly, moving on. Many artists have made that, you know, some stay purely as artists, and some eventually move on to becoming artist writers, or some become purely writers. I know Whilce, amongst all of you, has been one of those moved on to becoming artist writer or artist creator. Are you also looking to do some creator-owned work for yourself?
Yeah, in fact, this keeps coming up to me. I think Ken even said, didn't you talk about this the other day? It's like,
Yes, it
yes.
was me.
Yeah, and it's like, well, when are you going to do something? And somebody else had it just recently. It keeps coming up, and part of me, I've had so much fun with my take on other things, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's comic books, whatever it might be. I've been having a lot of fun with it. But yeah, someday I would love to come up with something. I think I'd have to find a good co-creator, somebody I can push off of.
I see.
Because what's happened is sometimes people have given me an idea, and then I get carried away, and I'm like, oh, and then this, and this, and this, and this. I just add so much to it to where they're saying, well, we're not partners here, you know, we ain't partners, we ain't friends. And that's not always welcome. So I have to find the right kind of collaborator.
I see. To kind of ground you as you do the work.
Yeah, and you know, it's not going to be anytime soon, but a few people have asked about it, so you know, if it'll happen, it'll happen.
It'll happen. And Whilce, you know, people have been asking me on Facebook since you'd be in the panel. They're asking, when are you coming back? We want Stone, we want Avalon Studios, we want more work. What are we going to see from you in terms of creator-owned work?
Actually, it's gonna be exciting in the next year or two. I've actually hooked up with locally. I've hooked up with a very big producer and a very big director. I can't really say specifics now, but we are going to build a Manananggal, Tikbalang, Duende, Everything universe here in Manila. You're going to find secret places here in Manila that actually lead into very interesting supernatural places. But we're going to build a whole universe, and we're going to build new heroes. I think I can spill the beans that, you know, it's going to be aiming to create our own Pinoy supernaturally based, like Justice League or whatever, a team of things. So we're not just going to do one movie, we're not just going to do one story, we're going to do a whole universe.
Wow. A round of applause, please. What a revelation right here at Asia Pop Comic Con. And how about you, Ken?
Well, yeah, I've got a few things in Toronto. I have 2 cartoon series in development now at the Teletoon, and I've got talks with Cartoon Network about another third. So I'm always kind of doing other stuff because I work for Lucasfilm and Hasbro, and I do a lot of those kind of work. So yeah, I've got lots of things. I've been writing for years. I actually co-wrote some of the books that I've actually worked on for different people. So I'm sometimes credited, sometimes not. But that's just the way it works. Yeah, I'm always rolling.
I see. And Billy, how about for yourself? What books have you, are you planning to do a lot of your own work or co-created work very soon?
Yes, well, I'm setting up my own studio in China right now, Shanghai. We're creating our own Asian superhero universe.
Fantastic, fantastic.
It's going to start from China, but you know, eventually we're going to have it, you know, the whole world, expand to the Western world, you know.
Wow! A round of applause as well for that one. Let me get this straight. You're Malaysian, but you're Malaysian American, but you live now in Australia. Am I right?
Yes, I was in Australia. Well, I live in the States first, and then Australia, and then now in Shanghai, China.
Are you in Shanghai right now? So that's the base of Tan Comics, is that right?
Yes, that's our base for now.
For now. And you'll be developing comic books that are meant for the region?
Yes, for the Chinese Asian, because they don't have one. Basically, I think a lot of Chinese people, they're always looking for the Western superhero, but they don't really actually have the universe for the superhero genre. So we're creating one that's true to the cultures and the people the character that people could relate it to.
I see. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Billy. And Mike, still looking to create or just keep on doing those great covers you've been doing for the past years?
Well, I have done very good. It seems like maybe I do one variant cover a year, but I don't, you know, I'm kind of past that point where I've got this burning desire to create something new. I mean, and I say this all the time, I consider continuity a young man's game. The older you get, the less likely you are to want to stay up all night meeting a deadline or something. So for me, you know, I'm more pursuing retirement activities than I am pursuing to do another book or something.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. And before we end today's discussion, I'm sure there's not enough time. I would have loved to taking this a longer time. But maybe just a couple of, many people also here in the audience, you know, many of us read comic books because we also aspire in our own ways to become a comic book writer, a comic book artist, or any involved in the industry. Maybe some tips and maybe some reality checks as well for people who want to break into that comic book world. Jason, can we start off with you?
Well, I think drawing is always a good thing. That's the thing. Every one of us as kids, we draw. I picture there's not one person here who, as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, wasn't drawing on the floor and having fun and not worrying about what it was going to be. Some of us go on to do it professionally, and the rest, unfortunately, just stop because they think it's not good. But drawing is always good. It's always a good experience to draw. So whether you're doing it professionally or you're doing it for fun, do it. Find a little time, just draw something. It doesn't matter whether it looks good or bad. It's a gift you give yourself. If you're doing it professionally, there's so many different ways to come in. I find myself adjusting. What I thought I was going to be doing is not what I'm doing. Wait, there's this new place to go. And that I find fulfilling. And it's not, all those lines are pretty blurred, so you can find something to do if you want to be really serious, knuckle down, and be responsible for the results. And if you're not, then you can still do it for the fun, and it doesn't matter how good or bad it is.
Again, round of applause, please, Mr. Jason Palmer. Thank you so much. Whilce, your words of wisdom for our aspiring comic book creators over here?
The word for me is exposure. Get your work out there. I know you're shy. I know you're hiyain. I know you're Pinoy. But get your work out there. There are a lot of people from all companies right now looking on the internet for people. It's free. Get your stuff out there in any way you can. Don't worry about pay or not pay. Just worry about getting your stuff out there. There's 2 ways to go. You get your stuff out there, somebody notices you, it makes you, it allows you to be the artist that you are, or want to be, or you stay hiyain, don't let anybody see your work, and nobody will ever discover you. I think myself, Mang Nestor before me, Mang Alex before me, sila Lenil, Miko, Carlo, Gilbert, everybody, we're showing kayang-kaya yung Pinoy. So get your stuff out there and join us.
Maraming salamat, Mr. Whilce Portacio. Ken, Lashley.
To be perfectly honest, I mean, we always have these voices in our head. People are talking to us and telling us we're not good, or we want to show somebody our work so they can approve us and say, yes, you got whatever it takes. I swear to, the only person you really should listen to is how do you feel about it. So always, I mean, don't listen to anybody external, good or bad. Someone says you're amazing, that may not be true. You know, someone says you're terrible, that also may not be true. So, you know, what you should do is worry about what you can do and just keep working at your own pace. And envy is a terrible thing. When you see other people doing well, you start getting upset about, oh, I can't do what they do, but that's their journey. You're on your own path, and just worry about you. And draw all the time, and then draw some more, and then draw some more.
That is advice for life. Thanks so much, Ken and Lashley. Billy Pan.
Whilce I'll get, aside from being a great artist, I think one thing that's really truly different from an artist and a comic book artist is that you should be able to tell a story. So you've got to learn from different angles, you know, different shots and stuff to be able to tell a story. You should be able, someone should be able to look at your picture without the word balloon and know what's going on, you know, be able to know what the story should be. And, you know, that's what I got. So.
Okay, thanks so much, Mr. Billy Pan. And for another our discussion, Mr. Mike Zeck.
Yeah, well, I think my biggest piece of advice is have a backup plan. I was fortunate. I don't tell anyone. If you have the dream, follow the dream. I was very fortunate. I had the dream. I lived the dream. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of people who have that dream. Very few of those. It's still a small industry. Very few of those are going to make it into the industry, and then even fewer of those are going to make it and be able to make a very good living, of the industry. That's like the sad truth. So, I encourage everybody to follow the dream just like I did. I would have hated for somebody to say, don't follow the dream. But I didn't have a backup plan, myself. So that's the best advice I can give somebody is still have a backup plan. Don't throw everything else aside just to follow a comics dream.
Again, thank you so much for the reality check, Mr. Mike Zeck. Again, ladies and gentlemen, round of applause, please, for our artists for Asia Pop Comic Con. Maraming salamat! Can we ask you guys to come to the front? Some photos with our friends over here.